The stark fluorescent lights of the Gilded Bean, a midtown cafe where anonymity was often purchased with overpriced lattes and calculated indifference, seemed to mock the raw, unraveling emotion laid bare at one of its polished marble tables. Ethan Hayes, a man whose empire was built on precision and control, stood frozen, his impeccably tailored navy suit now a mere costume against the shock that had bleached his usually tanned face. In his hand, held aloft like a damning piece of evidence, was a small white plastic stick. Two distinct pink lines glowed in the sterile light, a beacon of undeniable biological truth. His eyes, usually sharp and assessing, were wide with disbelief, fixed on the object, as if it were a foreign artifact beamed from another dimension. Opposite him, Olivia Sterling, her shoulders slumped, her vibrant blue blouse a striking contrast to the cold modern decor, fought a losing battle against a fresh wave of tears. A crumpled tissue, already soaked, was pressed uselessly against her trembling lip, doing little to stem the flow. Her breath hitched a ragged, broken sound in the otherwise hushed hum of the cafe. Shame, fear, and a burning, bitter defiance warred within her, each emotion tearing at the fragile composure she had desperately clung to. She had known this reaction, had rehearsed it endlessly in the quiet hours of her Upper West Side apartment, yet its icy reality was a punch to the gut. The air between them, usually thick with the unspoken tensions of their professional worlds, was now choked with the silent detonation of a deeply personal truth. "This can't be," Ethan finally managed, his voice a low, strangled rasp, devoid of its usual authority. His gaze flickered from the test to Olivia's tear-streaked face, a desperate search for an alternative reality, a mistake, a cruel joke. But there was no mistaking the profound, agonizing truth reflected in her watery eyes. His world, meticulously structured, insulated by wealth and strategic acquisitions, was suddenly tilting on its axis, threatened by two tiny pink lines that dared to defy every carefully constructed barrier he had erected since the tragic loss of his fiancée years ago. His 39 years had been a masterclass in avoiding personal complications, and this utterly unplanned, undeniably inconvenient biological revelation was the antithesis of everything he stood for. For Olivia, at 28, it was more than an inconvenience. It was a terrifying precipice, a collision course with a future she had barely dared to imagine, threatening to detonate everything she'd painstakingly tried to build. If you've ever felt the crushing weight of a secret, threatening to derail your entire life, hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. But to truly understand the desolate landscape of that cafe table, where a future hung precariously in the balance, we must rewind a few days to a small, charmingly cluttered apartment on the Upper West Side, where a single, stark white stick had first whispered its devastating truth to Olivia Sterling. The pre-dawn light was still a tentative smear across the Manhattan skyline, barely penetrating the blinds of her bedroom, but the digital pregnancy test clutched in her trembling hand shone like a searing beacon, its positive symbol a brutal confirmation. Her heart, already pounding a chaotic rhythm against her ribs, now hammered with the force of a desperate drum, echoing the unacknowledged truth of the past few weeks. The nausea that had plagued her mornings, the uncharacteristic fatigue that dragged at her every limb, the sudden inexplicable cravings for pickled onions, all dismissed as stress, as overwork, as the natural exhaustion of an architectural designer climbing the ladder in a relentlessly demanding city. Now they coalesced into a singular, undeniable reality. She stood in the gleaming white bathroom, a tiny sanctuary carved out of the city's relentless pace, but even its familiar comfort couldn't shield her from the seismic shift happening within. Her gaze drifted to her reflection, a young woman with tired but determined eyes, framed by dark cascading hair, now etched with a fear far deeper than any career setback. This wasn't just a personal crisis. It was a catastrophic collision course with a world she barely inhabited, a world ruled by men like Ethan Hayes, the tech mogul, CEO of Hayes Innovations, a man whose life was calibrated by quarterly reports and strategic acquisitions, not by unexpected biological revelations. Their connection, a brief, intense, and deeply regretted interlude during a high-stakes corporate retreat in Palm Springs a month prior, was supposed to be a fleeting escape from their respective pressures, a confidential mistake buried under a veil of professional discretion. For Olivia, it had been a moment of weakness born from exhaustion, the crushing weight of her family's medical debt back in Albany pressing down on her, whispering promises of a life unburdened, even if for just one night. She'd been burning the candle at both ends, funneling every spare penny, every bonus, every extra hour of overtime into her mother's ever-mounting treatment bills, leaving her emotionally vulnerable, intellectually drained. Ethan, the unattainable visionary, had seemed for a single blurry night to offer a moment of pure, unadulterated oblivion. For Ethan, she knew with a chilling certainty, it had been a lapse in judgment, an anomaly in a life meticulously devoid of personal complications. His empire, built on precision and foresight, left no room for the unpredictable, especially after the gaping wound left by the loss of his fiancée years ago. He had sealed himself off, transforming grief into an insatiable ambition, turning every human connection into a potential liability. And now, she was that liability, a walking, breathing, growing testament to a mistake he would undoubtedly wish to erase. The fear that gripped Olivia wasn't just about the daunting prospect of motherhood, a journey she felt utterly unprepared for, alone, adrift in the unforgiving current of New York City. It was about the impossible chasm between their lives and the inevitable fallout for her struggling career. Her recent promotion to a lead designer on a major Hayes Innovations project had been a lifeline, a testament to years of quiet, tireless dedication. If word of them got out, especially given his reputation, her career, barely off the ground, would be irrevocably damaged. The test in her hand felt like a ticking time bomb, threatening to detonate everything she'd painstakingly tried to build, every late night, every skipped meal, every sacrifice for her mother's future. The agonizing hours that followed were a blur of cold showers, frantic internet searches, and the quiet, persistent voice of her conscience. She couldn't hide this. She wouldn't. The thought of raising a child without acknowledging its father, however distant or unwilling, felt inherently wrong, a betrayal she couldn't countenance. With every ounce of courage she could muster, her hand trembling as she navigated through her contacts, she dialed Ethan's executive assistant. Her voice, remarkably steady despite the hurricane raging within her, requested a private meeting, urgent and discreet. She chose the gilded bean for its neutrality, its expensive anonymity a shield she hoped would protect her, if only for an hour. The 20-minute subway ride from her apartment to Midtown felt like an eternity, each stop a relentless beat of an approaching drum. She rehearsed her words, her arguments, her pleas, discarding them one by one. There was no gentle way to deliver a bomb. Ethan arrived precisely on time, as she knew he would. He moved with an almost unnerving efficiency, his silhouette cutting a sharp, imposing figure against the cafe's wide glass windows. Impeccably dressed, his posture radiated control, his expensive watch catching the light as he settled into the chair opposite her. His eyes, though polite, betrayed a hint of impatience, a silent testament to the countless high-stakes meetings she knew he juggled daily. He ordered an espresso, his voice smooth and commanding, utterly devoid of the warmth he had surprisingly momentarily displayed in Palm Springs. Olivia swallowed, her mouth suddenly dry, her throat constricting. She had envisioned 100 different scenarios, but none of them felt adequate for the gravity of the moment. Without a word, she reached into her large, worn leather bag, retrieved the small white plastic stick, and with a hand that shook despite her best efforts, slid it across the polished marble table. It stopped halfway, the two pink lines glaring up at him, a silent, undeniable accusation. The casual indifference he usually projected, the carefully cultivated mask of corporate stoicism, cracked. His composure crumbled, replaced by the raw, unadulterated shock that had turned his face ashen just moments ago in the cafe. The ensuing conversation was everything she had feared, and yet somehow worse. His immediate reaction was cold, calculated, a businessman evaluating a hostile takeover. "This can't be," he repeated, his voice now sharper, infused with a barely suppressed anger. "Are you certain? Have you seen a doctor?" His questions came in rapid fire, a barrage designed to dissect, to discredit, to find a flaw in her irrefutable evidence. He spoke of lawyers, his tone chillingly detached, of non-disclosure agreements, of the irreparable damage this could do to his company's upcoming IPO. He didn't ask about her feelings, her health, or the implications for her life. He spoke of liability, of assets, of reputation. He offered solutions that sounded like transactions, each word a cold, precise cut. A substantial sum, a clean break, a guarantee of her silence. Her career, he implied, could be generously supported, steered in a direction that would keep her far from Hayes Innovations, far from him. He presented it as a lifeline, a logical, mutually beneficial arrangement that would erase the inconvenience, eliminate the problem. Olivia, though expecting this dehumanizing exchange, felt a fresh wave of humiliation, hotter and more stinging than the tears she had shed earlier. She wasn't asking for money, or a ring, or any of the material comforts his world could offer. She was asking for him to acknowledge the life they had, however accidentally created. She was asking for a sliver of humanity, a recognition of shared responsibility. But his world was one of mergers and acquisitions, where human connections were just another liability to be mitigated, minimized, or, if necessary, acquired and controlled. The conversation escalated, words turning into sharp instruments, revealing the vast, unbridgeable gulf between their understandings of responsibility and humanity. His voice grew firmer, more demanding, as if sheer force of will could bend reality to his desires. Hers, though trembling, remained resolute. "This isn't a problem to be solved with a check, Ethan," she finally declared, her voice finding an unexpected strength from the depths of her quiet defiance. "This is a life, and it deserves to be acknowledged." She stood up, pushing her chair back with a scrape that echoed through the cafe, drawing a fleeting glance from a nearby businesswoman. The weight of his contempt, a palpable force, pressed down on her, almost physical. But a flicker of defiance, small yet potent, burned brighter inside her than ever before. She left him there, amidst the clinking of porcelain and the murmur of polite conversation, the stark white stick still lying on the polished marble table between them, a silent, devastating testament to a future neither of them had anticipated, and one he desperately wished he could unwrite. Ethan watched her go, a blur of defiant blue disappearing between the tables, leaving behind a silence that was suddenly deafening. The small white plastic stick lay like a forgotten weapon on the marble, two pink lines mocking his meticulously ordered existence. Anger, sharp and hot, initially flared within him, a familiar defense mechanism against anything that threatened his control. How dare she disrupt his life, his company, his impending IPO with such an inconvenient biological truth? He was Ethan Hayes, CEO of Hayes Innovations, a man who navigated global markets with a steady hand, whose every decision was a calculated chess move. This raw, messy, profoundly human problem felt like a catastrophic anomaly, a rogue variable in his perfectly formulated equation. Yet, as the anger began to cool, a strange, unfamiliar discomfort settled in its place. It wasn't pity, not exactly. It was something more unsettling, a ripple in the calm surface of his self-assurance. He remembered the tremor in her voice as she refused his offer, the quiet dignity in her posture, even as tears streamed down her face. "This isn't a problem to be solved with a check, Ethan. This is a life, and it deserves to be acknowledged." Her words, simple and stark, burrowed beneath his corporate defenses, refusing to be dismissed as mere emotional rhetoric. She hadn't asked for anything, not truly. She had merely demanded acknowledgement, a concept foreign to his transactional world. He picked up the test, turning it over in his hand, the plastic surprisingly light, yet heavy with unspoken consequence. This wasn't some minor acquisition he could absorb or discard. This was a direct, undeniable link to a past he'd carelessly, fleetingly engaged in, a link that now pulsed with an undeniable biological reality. He'd built his empire on precision, on anticipating every variable, on mitigating every risk. But this unexpected life was a risk he had utterly failed to foresee, a variable that defied all his algorithms. The image of her tear-streaked face, framed by the vivid blue of her blouse, refused to fade. It haunted him in the sterile silence of his penthouse apartment, echoed in the hum of his self-driving car, infiltrated the pristine data points of his quarterly reports. He found himself replaying their brief, intense interlude in Palm Springs, an anomaly he'd tried to relegate to a distant, regretful memory. He remembered the exhaustion in her eyes, the quiet intelligence, the surprising depth beneath her professional facade. He'd dismissed it as a fleeting escape for both of them, a momentary lapse in judgment. Now it felt like a crucial, unexamined chapter. He couldn't dismiss her as a gold digger, not after that conversation. There was no demand, no artifice, just raw, unvarnished truth. This forced him into an uncomfortable position, one he hadn't occupied in years: confusion. And when Ethan Hayes was confused, he sought data. He needed to understand the variables, to quantify the risk, to grasp the scope of the problem. The following morning, before dawn even painted the New York skyline, Ethan was in his office, the cityscape a silent, glittering tableau outside his floor-to-ceiling windows. He initiated a background check on Olivia Sterling, not with the intention to discredit her, a dark thought that had briefly crossed his mind and been swiftly dismissed, but to understand. He wanted facts, unvarnished and objective, to counter the inconvenient emotions stirring within him. He instructed his most discreet private investigator, a man whose services came with a price tag equivalent to a small country's GDP, to leave no stone unturned, but to ensure absolute confidentiality. He wasn't looking for dirt. He was looking for truth. The first report started trickling in within 24 hours, stark digital dossiers that painted a picture far removed from his initial cynical assumptions. Olivia Sterling, 28 years old, an architectural designer not from a privileged background but from Albany, New York. Her academic records were stellar, interrupted scholarships hinting at financial hardship. She had put herself through college, often working 2, sometimes 3 jobs to make ends meet, meticulously paying off student loans that dwarfed her modest salary. Her early struggles were detailed. A single mother, struggling to raise 2 children, instilling in Olivia a fierce independence and an almost pathological sense of responsibility. Then came the medical records, stark and impersonal, yet devastating in their implications. Her mother, Eleanor Sterling, had been battling a rare, aggressive form of multiple sclerosis for over a decade. The cost of her specialized treatment, the home care, the experimental therapies, created a financial black hole that Olivia had quietly, relentlessly tried to fill. Every spare penny, every bonus, every extra hour of overtime at the architectural firm was funneled into Albany. She was the primary caregiver, the financial backbone silently bearing the crushing burden of her mother's protracted illness. The weight she carried was immense, a silent anchor dragging her down even as she struggled to ascend in her demanding career. If you're familiar with the crushing weight of family responsibility, of sacrificing your own dreams for those you love, share your story in the comments. We're all in this together. This revelation hit Ethan with unexpected force. The woman he'd dismissed as a fleeting mistake, a potential corporate headache, was silently waging a war of her own, a battle far more profound and personal than any corporate merger. It wasn't about greed, it was about love, sacrifice, and an unshakable devotion to family. His initial callous offer of money now felt like an insult, a brutal misjudgment of character. She wasn't a gold digger. She was a quiet hero, navigating a labyrinth of medical bills and emotional strain, all while striving to build a career in a cutthroat industry. The reports then shifted to her professional life. Her talent in architectural design, recognized even within his own company's preliminary project reports for the Hayes Innovations campus expansion, was exceptional. Her designs were lauded for their innovative use of space, their sustainable vision, their human-centric approach. Yet despite her undeniable skill, her career trajectory had been slower than many of her male counterparts, her name often buried deep in project credits, her contributions minimized. She was often the unsung force behind award-winning projects, her brilliance frequently going uncredited, in a firm where men dominated leadership roles, a common, frustrating narrative in many industries. As Ethan delved deeper, sifting through pages of technical specifications and design critiques, a particular detail caught his eye. Tucked away in an old project file, almost an afterthought, was a small, hand-drawn sketch. It wasn't a blueprint, not a finalized rendering, but a raw, impassioned concept for a public park. Delicate lines flowed across the aged paper, depicting a verdant urban oasis with whimsical, interconnected pathways, a serene water feature that mimicked a natural stream and, distinctively, playful butterfly motifs etched into benches and light fixtures. It was a vision of tranquility, of connection, of life, flourishing in the heart of a concrete jungle. A jolt, sharp and visceral, shot through Ethan. He leaned closer, his eyes widening in disbelief. He knew this design. Years ago, he had served on a city beautification committee, a rare foray into civic duty, and a design for a public park had been submitted anonymously. He had been captivated by it then, by its sheer originality and profound sense of peace. He'd even considered funding it privately, but the creator had remained elusive, and the project had ultimately been awarded to a different, less inspired design. The delicate lines, the flowing water features, the playful butterfly motifs, they were unmistakable. It was the same design. The realization hit him like a physical blow, stripping away layers of his corporate armor. This wasn't just a talented designer, this was that designer. The one whose anonymous vision had resonated with him years ago, a vision he'd admired and almost funded, but whose creator he'd never identified. The sketch, now recognized, became a symbolic bridge, a connection deeper than a single regrettable night. It hinted at a soul far richer, far more complex than the problem he'd callously reduced her to. The stark beauty of her vision, combined with the quiet burden of her personal life, created a dissonance in his mind that was profoundly unsettling. She wasn't just the woman who was carrying his child. She was Olivia Sterling, a woman of profound talent and quiet resilience, whose path had inexplicably crossed his again in the most inconvenient yet strangely profound way. His ingrained corporate ruthlessness began to fray at the edges, challenged by a burgeoning, uncomfortable sense of respect for Olivia. The facts contradicted his assumptions, dismantling the carefully constructed narrative he'd built to justify his detachment. The burgeoning, uncomfortable sense of respect was quickly followed by a jarring intrusion into his quiet contemplation. His phone buzzed, vibrating insistently on his polished desk. The caller ID flashed, Veronica Hayes Thompson. His sister, a board member of Hayes Innovations and a woman whose ruthlessness often made his own seem quaint. Her timing, as always, was impeccable and utterly inconvenient. Ethan, her voice, sharp and devoid of warmth, sliced through the sterile air of his office. "We need to talk, immediately." He knew instantly what it was about. Rumors, like wildfire, always found a way to spread, even through the most tightly controlled corporate ecosystems. Veronica had somehow gotten wind of the whispers, the vague, unsettling hints of an incident involving him and a junior designer from the Palm Springs retreat. Her sources were impeccable, her network insidious. "Veronica," he began, attempting to inject a measure of control into his voice. "This isn't a good time." "It's never a good time for a scandal, is it, little brother?" she retorted, her tone dripping with thinly veiled contempt. "Especially not with the IPO just around the corner. Father's legacy, the family's pristine reputation, all of it. Are you listening?" He gripped the phone tighter, knuckles white. "I'm listening." "Good, because what I'm hearing is disturbing. An unplanned pregnancy, a subordinate. It smells of messy, unethical conduct. And it could be a stock market catastrophe, Ethan. The board is already antsy about the valuations. This kind of public relations nightmare could sink us." Her words were like cold, hard stones, each one hitting its mark with chilling precision. "There's nothing unethical," he said, the lie tasting bitter on his tongue. "It was consensual." "Consensual is irrelevant when it comes to perception, Ethan, especially when one party has significantly more power. The optics are terrible, and for a company like ours, perception is reality." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "I suggest we manage the situation. Discreetly, of course. For everyone involved." "Manage the situation?" Ethan echoed, a hollow feeling forming in his chest. He knew Veronica's code words. Eliminate the problem. Legally, publicly if necessary, ruthlessly, to protect the family name and the bottom line. It was the Hayes way, a philosophy deeply ingrained in their upbringing, taught at their father's knee. Protect the empire at all costs. But as Veronica continued to outline the dire consequences, the potential market volatility, the damage to their personal brands, Ethan found himself caught in a tightening vice. On one side, the ingrained corporate ruthlessness, the logical, calculated steps to safeguard everything he had built, everything his family represented. On the other, the image of Olivia Sterling's tear-streaked face, her quiet dignity, the quiet burdens she bore, and the profound, unexpected connection he now felt to her through a simple, hand-drawn sketch of a park. He looked at the reports, the evidence of her talent, her sacrifice, her quiet heroism. He thought of the butterfly motifs, the flowing water, the vision of a world more gentle, more connected, and he thought of the two pink lines, undeniable, transformative. He was caught between his past, defined by loss and ambition, and a future that was suddenly, terrifyingly, and perhaps beautifully, uncertain. The conversation with Veronica concluded with her chilling resolve. "I expect a plan, Ethan, and it better be foolproof." He hung up, the weight of her expectation a heavy cloak around him, knowing that the problem of Olivia Sterling was far more complex than a simple transaction, and the solution would demand a choice that would redefine not just his company, but himself. The phone felt heavy in Ethan's hand, a relic of a conversation that had left him more unsettled than any hostile takeover bid. Veronica's words echoed in the sterile silence of his office, cold and precise, each one a hammer blow against the nascent sense of unease that had begun to chip away at his carefully constructed indifference. Manage the situation, eliminate the problem. He'd spent his entire adult life doing just that, ruthlessly pruning any perceived liabilities, expertly navigating the treacherous waters of corporate ethics, all to protect the monolithic empire his father had built and he had expanded. But this time the problem had a name, a face etched with quiet defiance, and a future intertwined with his own in the most inconvenient yet undeniable way. He stared out at the sprawling, glittering expanse of New York City, a testament to ambition and power, a world he had conquered, yet a tiny hand-drawn sketch of a park, tucked away in an old project file, held more weight than all the skyscrapers combined. The butterfly motifs, the gentle curves, the promise of natural serenity amidst urban chaos, it was a vision that spoke of a soul he was only just beginning to perceive, a soul he'd almost crushed with his cynicism. The pregnancy, once a private crisis, was rapidly morphing into something far more intricate, a catalyst for a reckoning he hadn't seen coming. It was no longer just about two pink lines. It was about the two distinct trajectories of their lives colliding, forcing him to confront not just his actions, but his very definition of responsibility. Days later, the tension between them was a tangible thing, a vibrating hum in the air when Olivia reluctantly answered his summons, not to the Gilded Bean this time, but to a neutral, albeit imposing, conference room on the lower floor of the Hayes Innovations building. She wore a simple, elegant black dress, a stark contrast to the vivid blue of their last encounter, as if armoring herself against his corporate world. Her eyes, though still guarded, held a new resolve, a flicker of that quiet defiance he'd observed before. Ethan, however, was a different man from the one who had coldly offered her a transaction. He still wore the immaculate suit, the same air of authority, but his gaze, when it met hers, was complex, devoid of anger, tinged instead with a hesitant curiosity and a palpable dread. He had spent the intervening days devouring every detail from the background check, piecing together the fragments of Olivia's life, and now a new, unsettling narrative was taking shape. "Olivia," he began, his voice surprisingly gentle, lacking its usual crisp executive edge. I've been doing some research, not to discredit you but to understand." He paused, searching her face for any sign of softening, any hint of acceptance. She remained impassive, a wall of self-preservation. "I know about your mother, about Albany, about your scholarships." A flicker of surprise, quickly veiled, crossed her features. "That wasn't necessary, Mr. Hayes. My personal life is irrelevant." "No," he contradicted softly, pushing a folder across the polished table. It wasn't a contract, not a legal document. It was a printout of the park sketch enlarged, its delicate lines and butterfly motifs now boldly visible. "This, however, is relevant, and I believe it's intimately connected to everything." She glanced at the sketch, her breath catching, her own youthful, almost forgotten dream now laid bare before him. "It's an old concept," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "from a city beautification contest years ago. I submitted it anonymously. It never went anywhere." "It did go somewhere, Olivia, just not under your name." Ethan leaned forward, his voice dropping, infused with a new, dangerous intensity. "Do you remember the winner of that contest? The one that got so much publicity? Lyle Blackwood, Blackwood Industries." Olivia frowned, a faint tremor running through her. "I remember. It was a very similar design. I thought it was a coincidence at the time, a common inspiration, perhaps." She had been young, naive, devastated by the loss of her scholarship and the growing weight of her mother's illness, barely able to process the disappointment. "No coincidence," Ethan stated, his eyes hardening. Lyle Blackwood is a notorious plagiarist, a cutthroat opportunist who built his early career on stolen ideas. I had a run-in with him years ago, a similar situation involving a software patent. He's been a thorn in my side ever since, a master of intellectual property theft and corporate sabotage. He pulled up a digital presentation on the large screen embedded in the conference table, juxtaposing Olivia's original sketch with the winning design submitted by Blackwood. The similarities were undeniable, jarringly blatant. The unique flowing water features, the playful butterfly benches, even the precise arrangement of indigenous plant species. Blackwood's design was a crude, slightly altered copy of hers. "He didn't just steal your design, Olivia," Ethan continued, his voice now laced with a cold fury. "My investigator dug deeper. Blackwood, through a series of shell companies and manipulative moves, actively suppressed your career. After that contest, he had a network of contacts subtly discredit any firm that showed interest in your portfolio, labeling your work as derivative or unoriginal. He made sure you remained in the shadows, struggling for recognition. He even, indirectly, contributed to the financial woes that forced you to take on more debt for your mother's care, thus making you vulnerable enough for our fateful Palm Springs encounter." The words hung in the air, heavy with a terrible truth. Olivia's face, which had been pale, now flushed with a mixture of shock and dawning horror. Her quiet struggles, her persistent feeling of being overlooked despite her relentless efforts, suddenly made a terrifying, infuriating kind of sense. The invisible hand that had consistently held her back, the brick wall she'd repeatedly hit despite her undeniable talent, now had a name: Lyle Blackwood. It wasn't just a stolen design, it was a stolen future, a manipulated trajectory that had led her directly to this precarious moment. He did this," she whispered, the enormity of the betrayal washing over her, colder and more bitter than any personal slight. This wasn't just about an impersonal act of corporate theft, it was about the systemic dismantling of her aspirations, the deliberate erosion of her potential, all for one man's gain. And the realization that this injustice had directly led to her financial vulnerability, making her susceptible to the very circumstances that now tied her to Ethan Hayes, was a sickening, dizzying revelation. "He did," Ethan confirmed, his jaw tight, his eyes burning with an intensity she'd never seen before. "And the timing of your promotions, your struggle to break through, it wasn't just typical industry bias. It was calculated. A deliberate campaign to keep you under wraps, to prevent you from ever challenging his stolen success. The stakes were no longer just about an unplanned pregnancy, a personal crisis to be solved with a check. They were about correcting a historical injustice, exposing a predatory rival, and reclaiming Olivia's rightful place in an industry that had silently, systematically tried to erase her. The magnitude of it was overwhelming, a tidal wave threatening to engulf them both. Ethan's initial shock transformed into something else entirely, a protective fury, cold and formidable. Lyle Blackwood wasn't just a rival now, he was a shared enemy, a shadow that had manipulated both their lives. The deeper connection he now felt to Olivia wasn't just through a child, but through this shared history of betrayal and manipulation. He saw the fire igniting in her eyes, the quiet defiance transforming into a simmering rage, and he recognized something kindred within her, a strength that mirrored his own. If you've ever felt the burning injustice of having your hard work stolen, your voice silenced, leave a comment and share your thoughts. He's also a key investor in a number of rival firms, trying to undercut Hayes' innovations at every turn, Ethan continued, his voice gaining its familiar, authoritative ring, but now infused with a personal vendetta. He uses stolen ideas, underhanded tactics, and corporate espionage. This isn't just about you, Olivia. It's about a pattern of behavior that has damaged countless lives and undermined the very integrity of our industry. The pregnancy, once a deeply private crisis, a source of personal turmoil and immense fear, now became the unlikely catalyst for a public reckoning. It had forced them together, brought them face to face with an inconvenient truth, and in doing so, had unearthed an even deeper, more insidious truth that threatened to unravel years of carefully constructed lies. Ethan looked at Olivia, truly saw her not as a problem, but as a formidable ally, a woman whose quiet strength and undeniable talent had been unjustly suppressed. And he, the tech mogul obsessed with control and precision, found himself aligning with her, not out of obligation, but out of a burgeoning sense of justice and a fierce desire to right a profound wrong. The battle lines were drawn, and the enemy was clear. The corporate world, with its gleaming towers and hidden machinations, was about to discover the full, devastating force of an inconvenient truth, brought to light by 2 pink lines and a stolen dream. The air in the conference room crackled with a newfound, dangerous energy. The initial dread that had clouded Olivia's features had transformed into something sharper, a cold, focused resolve. The revelation of Lyle Blackwood's calculated treachery, his systematic efforts to suppress her career, had ignited a firestorm within her. It wasn't just anger, it was a profound sense of validation, the pieces of a baffling puzzle finally snapping into place, illuminating years of inexplicable setbacks and professional frustrations. The quiet injustices she had internalized, the self-doubt she had battled, now had a clear, malevolent source. And with that clarity came an unshakable determination for retribution. Ethan, observing the transformation in her, felt a surge of something akin to admiration. This wasn't the tearful, vulnerable woman from the Gilded Bean. This was a force, a sleeping giant awakened by a brutal truth. The corporate shark within him recognized and respected that fierce new glint in her eyes. The personal vendetta against Blackwood, which had been a low simmer, now roared to life, fueled by the injustice inflicted upon Olivia. The lines between personal and professional, once so clearly defined for Ethan, were blurring at an alarming rate. "We expose him," Olivia stated, her voice steady, surprisingly devoid of tremor. "Every single act of plagiarism, every manipulative move." Ethan nodded, his expression grim. "Not just expose, we dismantle him. Blackwood's network is extensive, but his foundation is built on stolen sand. We hit him where it hurts, his reputation, his finances, and his carefully constructed image." The plan, audacious and complex, began to form in the hours that followed, stretching into late nights in Ethan's pristine office, fueled by lukewarm coffee and an unwavering focus. They delved deep into Blackwood's past, using Hayes Innovation's vast resources. Ethan's private investigators, previously tasked with Olivia's background, now pivoted to uncover every hidden skeleton in Blackwood's closet. They found a trail of creative ideas mysteriously surfacing in Blackwood's portfolio after close encounters with nascent talents, a pattern of aggressive litigation against small independent designers, and a history of ethically dubious land deals. Olivia, for her part, unearthed her old design files, meticulously documenting every stage of her park concept, from initial sketches to detailed renderings, all dated and time-stamped, a forgotten arsenal of evidence. She collaborated with Ethan's legal team, her architectural expertise proving invaluable in dissecting Blackwood's plagiarized work, pointing out the subtle yet undeniable differences that betrayed the copycat. The delicate butterfly motifs, her signature, were crudely rendered in Blackwood's version, lacking the nuanced artistry of her original vision. The water features, meant to flow organically, appeared stiff and unnatural in his stolen design. The strategy was two-pronged, a legal offensive and a public relations blitz. Ethan, with his unparalleled connections in the tech and media world, began planting seeds, subtle whispers in the right ears, hinting at an impending scandal of epic proportions. He orchestrated a carefully timed leak to a prominent investigative journalist known for their uncompromising integrity and deep dives into corporate malfeasance. The story wasn't just about plagiarism, it was about a systemic abuse of power, a predatory giant preying on the unseen talents of the industry. The initial shockwave hit the design and tech industries with the force of a tsunami. The headline, emblazoned across every major business publication and tech blog, was devastating. Hayes Innovation's CEO Ethan Hayes aligns with whistleblower to expose decade-long plagiarism scheme by industry titan Lyle Blackwood. The accompanying article, meticulously researched and heavily sourced, laid bare Blackwood's long history of intellectual property theft, featuring the stark, irrefutable side-by-side comparison of Olivia's original park design and Blackwood's brazenly stolen version. The public reaction was instantaneous and explosive. The story resonated deeply, tapping into a collective frustration with corporate arrogance and the silencing of original voices. Olivia Sterling, once an invisible designer, found her name and her original park design celebrated on national news. Architects, artists, and innovators who had long suffered similar injustices rallied around her, their voices amplifying the outrage. Social media was ablaze with needing justice for Olivia, and Yitin exposed Blackwood, turning the corporate scandal into a cultural phenomenon. Lyle Blackwood's world began to unravel with terrifying speed. His carefully cultivated image as a visionary crumbled under the weight of irrefutable evidence. Investors, wary of public backlash and the mounting legal challenges, began to pull out. Contracts were frozen, partnerships dissolved. His board, facing a shareholder revolt, initiated an internal investigation that quickly unearthed further instances of fraud and unethical practices, turning Blackwood's company into a legal and financial quagmire. The downfall was swift, brutal, and spectacularly public. Within days, Blackwood Industries, once a formidable competitor, was in freefall, its CEO facing criminal charges and utter professional ruin. The Hayes Innovations Board, initially wary and deeply uncomfortable with the unfolding drama, found themselves in a precarious position. Veronica Hayes Thompson, ever the pragmatist, had stormed into Ethan's office, her face a mask of furious calculation. "This is madness, Ethan. You've detonated a nuclear bomb in the middle of our IPO preparations." "On the contrary, Veronica," Ethan had responded, his voice calm, confident. "I've shown the world that Hayes Innovations stands for integrity, for justice. We're not just about profit, we're about principle, and in an age where authenticity is currency, that's priceless." He presented them with data. A sudden, unexpected surge in public approval ratings for Hayes Innovations, an uptick in consumer engagement, a wave of positive media coverage praising Ethan's decisive action and the company's commitment to ethical business practices. The market, surprisingly, had reacted not with panic but with renewed confidence in a leader willing to fight for what was right, even against immense personal and corporate risk. The public's embrace of Ethan's integrity and Olivia's talent was undeniably a net positive, especially with the impending IPO. Veronica, though still calculating, had to concede. The numbers spoke a language even she understood. The calculated risk had paid off, transforming a potential scandal into a powerful narrative of redemption and justice. The consequences for Ethan and Olivia extended far beyond the corporate battlefield. In the quiet aftermath, after facing down corporate enemies and public scrutiny, their bond deepened, forged in the crucible of shared adversity. The intensity of their collaboration, the late nights spent strategizing, the shared relief and triumph as Blackwood's empire crumbled, had stripped away the awkwardness of their initial encounter, revealing something far more profound. They had seen each other at their most vulnerable, their most determined, their most human. The pregnancy, initially a source of turmoil, a deeply personal secret that had threatened to unravel their lives, had now become a symbol of their unexpected partnership, a silent, growing testament to the life they had inadvertently created and now undeniably chosen to embrace. The fear that had initially gripped Olivia had slowly, steadily transmuted into a quiet, profound hope. She was no longer just the struggling designer burdened by debt. She was a recognized talent, her visionary park concept finally receiving the acknowledgement it deserved, and a future mother facing a new, uncharted path. One evening, after the dust had largely settled and Blackwood's fate was sealed, Ethan found Olivia in his office, poring over new renderings of her park design, her face alight with a passion he found himself increasingly drawn to. He watched her for a moment, the soft glow of the monitor illuminating her profile before stepping forward. "Olivia," he said, his voice soft, uncharacteristically hesitant, "we need to talk. About us. About everything." She turned, her eyes meeting his, a mixture of anticipation and trepidation in their depths. The formal distance that had once defined them had evaporated, replaced by an unspoken understanding. "I know what I said at the Gilded Bean," he began, his gaze unwavering. "I was a different man then, or at least I was trying to be. I saw a problem and I tried to solve it the only way I knew how, with a transaction. I was wrong, Olivia, profoundly wrong." He took a step closer, his voice earnest. "What we've been through, what you've shown me, it's changed things, changed me." He reached for her hand, his touch gentle, hesitant. "This child, our child, is not a mistake. It's a miracle, and I want to be a part of it. A real part. Not just a name on a birth certificate, not just a financial arrangement. I want to build a future with you, if you'll have me. Olivia's eyes welled up, but these were tears of a different kind, of relief, of a blossoming hope, of a profound sense of coming home. Ethan, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. He continued, his words pouring out, a torrent of long-suppressed emotions. And your park, your vision, it deserves more than just a stolen victory. I want to fund it, properly, not just as a philanthropic gesture, but as a central part of Hayes Innovation's future. He paused, then dropped the true bombshell. I'm establishing a new division, Hayes Sustainable Urban Design, dedicated to projects that integrate cutting-edge technology with environmental consciousness, human-centric design and community engagement, and I want you to co-lead it. With me. Olivia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Co-lead? Her, the struggling designer, the uncredited talent now poised to shape the future of urban design within one of the world's most influential tech companies. It was a dream she had never dared to articulate, a future that had seemed utterly unattainable. Ethan smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes, crinkling the corners. Your visionary park concept will be our flagship project. The world needs more of your butterflies, Olivia, more of your vision. And I need you. In that moment, amidst the glowing screens and the silent city outside, their future, once so uncertain, so fraught with tension, began to crystallize. It was not a contractual obligation, not a forced alliance, but a genuine choice, born from shared adversity, unexpected respect, and a burgeoning, undeniable love. Ethan publicly announced his commitment to Olivia and their child, a move that stunned the corporate world but endeared him further to the public. He offered her not just his support, but a partnership, a true co-leadership role where her visionary park concept, the genesis of so much pain and now so much promise, would finally be realized, not just as a design, but as a living, breathing testament to their shared future. Olivia, no longer just a struggling designer, but a recognized talent, a future mother, and a formidable partner, found both professional and personal fulfillment. Their story, initiated by 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test, became a testament to how the most inconvenient truths can shatter old lives, expose hidden wrongs, and forge a future more meaningful and authentic than any they could have planned. The announcement sent ripples of shock and awe through the corporate world, reverberating far beyond the boardrooms of Hayes Innovations. Ethan Hayes, the notoriously private, emotionally guarded tech mogul, standing before a phalanx of cameras and flashing lights, not to unveil a new revolutionary product, but to publicly declare his commitment to Olivia Sterling and their unborn child, was unprecedented. His voice, usually reserved for quarterly reports and strategic acquisitions, was imbued with an unexpected warmth, a raw sincerity that captivated an audience accustomed to corporate platitudes. "This past year," he had stated, his gaze finding Olivia in the front row, a soft, almost imperceptible smile gracing his lips, "has taught me invaluable lessons about integrity, about justice, and about the profound, transformative power of unexpected connections. Olivia Sterling is not just an exceptional architectural designer, she is a woman of immense strength, vision, and unwavering principle. Our journey together began under complicated circumstances, but it has led us to a place of profound partnership, both personally and professionally. I am proud to announce that Olivia will be my co-leader in the new Hayes Sustainable Urban Design Division, where her groundbreaking vision for urban renewal, starting with her magnificent park concept, will come to fruition. And I am even prouder to say that we are building a family together." The media frenzy that followed was immense, a mixture of scandal, admiration, and heartwarming human interest. The narrative of the underdog designer, her talent stolen, now championed by a powerful magnate, resonated deeply with the public. Olivia's story, once confined to the whispers of industry insiders, became a beacon of hope for countless artists and innovators who had felt unseen, unheard, or unjustly treated. She handled the sudden glare of the spotlight with a grace that surprised even Ethan. Her interviews were articulate, passionate, focusing not on personal drama, but on the importance of intellectual property rights, sustainable design, and the need for greater equity in creative fields, Veronica, ever the pragmatist, swallowed her initial fury. The stock market, rather than plummeting, had reacted with an unexpected surge, buoyed by the narrative of integrity, innovation, and a CEO who dared to defy corporate conventions. The public loved a good redemption story, and Ethan seemed to be unfolding beautifully. "You played your cards well, little brother," she had conceded, a hint of grudging respect in her voice. "But don't think for a second I'm not watching every move." Life, for Olivia, underwent a seismic shift. Her small Upper West Side apartment, once a sanctuary of quiet struggle, became a temporary haven of joyful chaos. Ethan moved in, bringing with him a surprising domesticity that slowly softened the edges of his corporate persona. He learned to navigate her small, charmingly cluttered kitchen, to appreciate the quiet rhythm of her creative process, to listen to her dreams and fears with an attentiveness she'd never imagined possible. The fear that had once gripped her, the terrifying precipice she had faced alone, was now replaced by a shared excitement, a blossoming sense of security and belonging. The Hayes Sustainable Urban Design Division became a passion project for both of them. Olivia, now with unparalleled resources at her disposal, dove into her work with renewed vigor. Her park concept, once a wistful sketch, began to take tangible shape. Teams of engineers, landscape architects and urban planners, handpicked by Ethan for their innovative spirit, rallied around her vision. The initial site, a neglected, barren lot in a struggling neighborhood of Queens, was transformed into a bustling hub of activity. The community, initially skeptical, embraced Olivia's inclusive approach, participating in design workshops, offering insights, and painting vibrant murals on the construction barriers. Ethan, usually immersed in the abstract world of algorithms and market trends, found a profound satisfaction in the tangible creation of something beautiful and impactful. He watched Olivia lead meetings, her voice confident, her ideas brilliant, her passion infectious. He saw the respect she commanded, not just as his partner, but as a visionary in her own right. The man who once spoke of lawyers and non-disclosure agreements now spoke of biodiversity, community gardens, and permeable paving. The park project became a physical manifestation of their shared journey, a testament to how something unexpected, even inconvenient, could blossom into profound purpose. Their personal lives, too, blossomed amidst the professional whirlwind. Pregnancy, a journey Olivia had once dreaded, became a shared adventure. Ethan, who had always been a man of meticulous schedules, found himself embracing the unpredictable joys and anxieties of impending parenthood. He attended every prenatal appointment, devoured parenting books with the same intensity he applied to market analyses, and delighted in every flutter of movement within Olivia's womb. The quiet, unspoken grief he had carried for his lost fiancée began to recede, replaced by a new, vibrant hope, a willingness to embrace the messy, beautiful chaos of a future he had once sworn off. Olivia's mother in Albany, her health somewhat stabilized by ongoing treatments, watched her daughter's transformation with immense pride. The financial burden, once crushing, was now lifted, allowing Olivia to focus on her health, her career, and her growing family. The long-distance calls were no longer filled with veiled anxieties about medical bills, but with excited updates about the park's progress and the latest ultrasound images. The grand opening of the Hayes Sterling Community Park, nearly a year after the initial revelations, was a momentous occasion. The barren lot had been transformed into a vibrant urban oasis, a testament to Olivia's original vision and the collaborative spirit of the new division. Butterflies, real ones, fluttered among the native wildflowers that lined the winding pathways. Children's laughter echoed from the innovative playground, and the serene water feature, just as Olivia had envisioned it years ago, flowed gently, a soothing balm in the heart of the city. Lyle Blackwood's name, once associated with the stolen design, was now a forgotten footnote, replaced by the enduring legacy of Olivia Sterling. Ethan stood beside Olivia, his hand protectively resting on her swollen belly. Their child was due in a few weeks, a boy they had already named Arthur, a name that resonated with strength and a touch of old-world charm. The cheers from the assembled crowd, the joyous energy of the community, were a symphony of triumph. He looked at Olivia, radiant in a flowing dress, her eyes shining with pride and happiness, and a profound sense of gratitude washed over him. He had found not just a partner, but a purpose, a future he hadn't known he was missing. Olivia, surrounded by the tangible proof of her long-suppressed dream, felt a completeness she had never imagined. The journey had been arduous, fraught with fear and heartbreak, but it had led her here, to this moment of unparalleled joy, surrounded by love, purpose, and the blossoming future growing within her. The quiet defiance that had burned within her for so long had finally erupted into a blazing triumph. In the quiet moments that followed the official ceremony, as the crowd dispersed and the setting sun cast long shadows across the new park, Ethan pulled Olivia aside. "There's something else," he said, his voice soft, his eyes filled with a tenderness that still surprised her. He reached into his pocket and produced a small velvet box. Olivia's heart fluttered. She knew what it was, yet the sight of it took her breath away. He opened it, revealing a stunning, elegant ring, a sapphire nestled between two sparkling diamonds, echoing the deep blue of her eyes. It was not ostentatious, but exquisitely crafted, a symbol of enduring commitment. "Olivia Sterling," Ethan said, dropping to one knee amidst the newly planted greenery, a rare, vulnerable gesture for the formidable CEO. "You shattered my carefully constructed world, exposed my blind spots, and rebuilt me into a better man. You brought light and purpose into a life I thought was complete. You are my partner, my equal, the mother of my child, and the most extraordinary woman I have ever known. Will you do me the immense honor of becoming my wife?" Tears streamed down Olivia's face, not of sorrow or fear, but of pure, unadulterated joy. She reached out, cupping his face in her hands. "Yes, Ethan, 1,000 times. Yes." He rose, slipping the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit. He then gently kissed her, a tender, heartfelt kiss that sealed their past, acknowledged their present, and promised an extraordinary future. The scent of blooming flowers, the murmur of the water feature, and the faint, sweet echo of children's laughter filled the air. Their story, initiated by 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test, had indeed shattered old lives, exposed hidden wrongs, and forged a future more meaningful and authentic than any they could have planned, a future now cemented by love, partnership, and the promise of a life filled with endless possibilities.